Well, you have just read what is effectively the conclusion of Mark's Gospel. There are some verses remaining, which we'll look at hopefully next Sunday. But those verses have a special character to them, and we'll talk about that next week. Sometimes whenever we rush into the big story, we overlook some of the details that are in the script. And oddly, Mark doesn't tell us a lot about the resurrection in the Gospel. He devotes just 8 verses to the resurrection. And in that, Jesus doesn't make a personal appearance. Some speculate that Mark didn't finish the Gospel for some reason, or that in some way, and for some reason, the end of the Gospel has been lost. What is recorded here is the meeting of the women at the tomb with an angel. And I wonder, did you ever notice before that this conversation is one-sided? There is not a word spoken by the women that is recorded by Mark in the Gospel. So after showing the women the empty tomb, there are 3 things that we note in what the angel says. First of all, he gives them a command. Now, it's not a command that comes from him. It's one that comes from Jesus. He tells them to go and tell Jesus' disciples. Then he tells them what to say to them. So there is information imparted. And then there is an assurance. He will see you there. Now, it sounds a bit off, but it's true all the same to say that the empty tomb in itself doesn't prove the resurrection of Jesus. There could have been many reasons for that, and some of them were used by the opponents of the disciples and are still today. It could have been that Jesus' body was stolen. What the empty tomb does do, though, is to sharpen the understanding that we have of the nature of the resurrection, together with the appearances of Jesus that are recorded in other Gospels. It shows that this resurrection is a bodily resurrection. Now you may ask, why is that important? It's important because it affirms what is recorded elsewhere. That it wasn't a vision and it wasn't a hallucination by the disciples out of fear or through longing to see Jesus again. Jesus' appearance to the disciples and the tomb being empty are like 2 sides of the one coin that come together. And put it like that, then we see clearly the resurrection of Jesus was a bodily resurrection. So in this one-sided conversation, the first thing is that they are shown proof of the resurrection. The reason the tomb was empty is because Jesus had risen from the dead. Now, the verb is in the past tense. It is something that happened before this. But it's also in the passive voice, which shows that this is something that Jesus did not do himself, but God did. God raised him to life again. Now, the proof of that and the invitation to come and see the place where he lay is given to the women, and they see that the tomb is empty. The empty tomb is revealed. The command then comes. There's a message from the risen Lord to the women. And the command, the task that he gives, is the very first task that anybody is given by the risen Lord Jesus Christ. And it is to go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of them. Now, it's not the angel's command. It comes from Jesus. And we can be fairly confident of that because of the details within that command. The disciples and Peter. Now, the disciples as a group had abandoned Jesus in the garden. They'd run away. But Peter especially had denied Jesus in the courtyard of the high priest. So there is a special mention here of Peter because I think of that denial. So already there is a sign of the grace of Jesus here in this account. Jesus knows Peter's heart. He knew what was on this man's mind. And it suggests to me that Jesus clearly knows the inner turmoil of the man, that he feels that he has let Jesus down, that he is a failure in what he has done. Now the command to the women to bear that good news, to carry the message of acceptance after failure shows an understanding, I think. There is a hidden grace in this message that is committed to the women. But something prevented that, and that was fear. Now, no wonder that is the case, for in a way we can understand how they feel. It's been difficult for them to absorb the good news or to adjust to this new situation. They expected to anoint a dead body. They came to the tomb for that purpose. But the tomb was open, the body was gone. The angel, in the guise of a young man, tells them to take a message to the disciples. And because of that, because of the uncertainty of it, they are filled with fear, and that's not surprising. We wonder what is racing through their minds. Where is the body? Who has taken it? Who is this man that is telling us this message? Not least, perhaps, because they sense that there is something going on here. There is a supernatural meaning to all of this, and it's beyond their understanding. And so there is a sense of awe with these women. Now you say, and rightly so, didn't Jesus just tell them that he would meet them in Galilee? Hadn't he said this before? Yes, he did. But remember, it's not clear at all how much of that they grasped and what their level of understanding was any more than the disciples themselves. But even when proof or evidence of God's work is given to them, in this case the resurrection, it is not met by faith. And when it is not met by faith, it becomes meaningless and frightening. And what is clear from verse 8 is that for a time at least, fear prevented these women passing on this message that was committed to them by Jesus himself. Now, these things are common for us, even today with all our knowledge. When we have a particular sense of call, or even considering the general commission as witnesses, very often we are filled with fear, and the first response of fear, or the first outcome of fear, is that we say nothing, we keep quiet. Well, when we find the person of Jesus, when he comes beside us, he drives out fear and he brings peace to us. We're going to pause just at that point. We're going to look at this again further, but meantime, let's worship further as we sing together, How Sweet the Name of Jesus Sounds.